that's right now supposed to be getting our feedback and take it to Parliament. So James Moragori, what have you noticed as the budget cuts? And then after you give us your feedback, we want to see people who'd like to ask questions or put a comment on this. Please raise your hand and we're going to give you the mic. James?
Thank you. Thank you, Alec. So from where we are and working, amongst many other institutions under the Okoa Uchumi, we were very keen to follow the president's commitment to austerity measures. But looks like literally the austerity measure that the president committed to was for citizens and not for government. And I think this is where now we would expect Parliament, which now it's the faith in Parliament has went down, and we hope over time it will come back. We're still surviving on hope on our Parliament, that it should be able to question, because like Julian's said, Parliament should not be defending the executive. The executive, when National Treasury submits its midst to Parliament, National Treasury has done its part. And no one from the National Treasury sits in parliamentary committees. So sometimes when we see our members of Parliament defending executive propositions, it is very disappointing. How, of course, we expect that to happen because the executive, the ruling party, coalition has a majority in Parliament. So one of the things in these estimates that we note is that while there were commitments to strongly align on parastatal reforms, the supplementary estimate has not spoken to that. And we should be keen to note that most of the resources that are going to state departments are conduits to state-owned enterprises. And those state-owned enterprises, the president, for example, the president committed and said there were 47 of them that were needed to be looked at. However, we know it's only Parliament that can dissolve those state-owned enterprises, which are an act of Parliament, or the ones that are the Gazette notice. They need to be, they need to be gazetted, and their functions taken over by the parent ministry, or those functions devolved where they are. So we see lack of that commitment. However, of course, in this supplementary budget, and again, we're saying the commitment, we would wish to see Parliament interrogate this further, to be able to question some of the decisions and cut. For example, you notice that there is a lot of enterprise and financial inclusion resources. And when we reviewed all this, we found there were approximately 9.7 billion across different funds in the State Department of Micro Small Enterprise, State Department for Youth Affairs, State Department for Gender, quite a number of funds amounting to around 9.7 billion. Now, these resources, while it is important for government to provide these resources, I think the government should also get at a point where its responsibility is to create a decent business environment. Yeah, of course, we've seen the Auditor General raise questions around the Financial Inclusion Fund, and so that should be also have been for that conversation. So what we've clearly seen coming from that, we don't feel the strong commitment, strong desire, because there is no reason why we are finding 122 billion has been cut from development expenditure, and approximately 34 billion is what was cut from the recurrent expenditure. Recurrent is it's that Mandazi budget, and a lot of tea, yeah. And of course, there's a lot of allowances, for civil service. We pay people for the work that they are paid to do. And those are the things we are saying. If you have your salary, it needs to be consolidated. And there, for example, there was salaries conference, convened by Salaries and Remuneration Commission. That should have formed a very strong base of the supplementary budget. And for example, in this supplementary budget, the SRC, which to a greater extent has been has also disappointed citizens, ought to have taken and seized this moment to question budget by budget allocation on resources and allowances provided for civil service, so that we are not paying people a salary and also giving them allowances for doing the work they were supposed to be doing. The other question is, of course, we've seen there has been allocation to the State Department. This would be State Department for Economic Planning, which has seen an increase of around 5.2 billion to fund programs and bursaries and medical insurance elderly. Now, and that's at the NGCF Better program. Now, should we be talking about increasing the CDF kit while we are struggling in raising resources? These are some of the questions that we are saying, that probably potentially we have wished to see the executive and led strongly by the presidency. Question. Of course, it's trying to make it, it's a sweetener for Parliament. But of course, we know the Constituency Development Fund is a contentious subject and needs to be looked at. And for example, for this year, the things, those resources are, for CDF, for example, should have been reconsidered, in my opinion. So as we consider that we are in an austerity function. Thank you, Eric.
Eric, can I just chime in there?
Please go ahead.
Very briefly, I'll keep it very brief. So James is on the right tangent there. And I just wanted to add that in this window for public participation, and one of the comments that I have submitted is this: look, the PFM Act is very clear in this country that ideally our wage bill to revenue should be at a ceiling of 35. We are in the mid-40s. We are actually at about 45 or 46%. I mean, granted, I know we have come down over time significantly. But shouldn't that be the first starting point of this supplementary budget? That we have a very serious look at the public sector wage bill, including allowances, because that's really the elephant in the room in this conversation. And see how to rationalize that expenditure, because as we said, we're in a moment where there are no sacred cows. Any expenditure item should be able to go to the chopping board and be looked at and slashed. Think about this, Eric. If you look at the National Assembly supplementary allocation, the budget for domestic travel and subsistence for the National Assembly has been reduced by 23% to 3.97 billion. I mean, just think about that. 3.97 billion is not pocket change. If you look at the allocation towards the fertilizer subsidy, it is not too much far from that. But that is a line item for domestic travel and subsistence. We need to be serious about this expenditure rationalization. If you look at their budget for something like hospitality, it's now about just 274 million Kenya shillings, a tidy sum. So there are areas where we can aggressively cut. I just don't think that the Treasury is appreciating the spirit of the moment in which we are, where Kenyans are simply saying that there is nothing that cannot be touched at this point. Thanks, Eric.
All right. Thank you very much, Julian. I want to talk, pick some of the comments and questions that are coming in. If you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand and we will assign you the mic to go here. Rega says, if the intention of this supplementary budget is to address issues we've already raised on cutting on spending by slashing out unnecessary expenditure and wastage, why would public participation at this point be celebrated? Isn't it laughable that it took Gen Z to force the government to rethink its fiscal policy and live within their means? I don't find that this should be lauded as a golden opportunity. It involves the people. We needed not to be here in the first place. Coming to the comment on that, Stephanie says, in my opinion, the call for public participation is sabotage, given that the supplementary budget is way more complex and requires more sophistication to analyze. I can bet it will sail through with minimal, I'll be surprised, to no substantial or inspiring changes. Nduka says the government uses the supplementary budget as a backdoor to allocate things that they would not usually allocate through the normal budget. After voting for supplementary budget, does it take effect immediately? That's a question that Muragori, you can answer quickly as we go on. Just a question, are payments on ongoing projects under recurrent expenditure? Because I've seen the report by the Auditor General, it has a column in the county's development expenditure reports. Karaoke had told us where to find the budget. And Daniel says, I think the conversation on unpacking the budget is good, but the undiscussed conversations is how we're able to, one, increase our revenue collections with our current tax policies, and two, renegotiate our debt situation. I think we're going to host a debt conversation in coming days just to look at our debt issue. So I just want to come straight to you, James, and you can answer a couple of that question, and then we pick up some more. One, when the Budget and Appropriations Committee presents its report to Parliament next week, what happens next? And how does the voting happen? And then what happens to that? Does it go back to the president and he gets his signs and that becomes our new budget? What's that process?
Thanks, Alec. Before I come to that, let me also mention that our supplementary budget, and I know Julian's had raised a question around how it is presented, is a challenge. So you have the way the appropriation bill is presented, and also the supplementary budget. There is no correlation because the estimates themselves are in a program-based format, meaning that if it's a Ministry of Health, you have the State Department of Medical Services, and under it has those programs and the allocations. Then you'll go, and then there is the annexes, and the program-based budget for this means that it allows us to see if the Ministry of Health says we are going to vaccinate 1,000 shillings, we are allocating this amount of money to the 1,000 shillings. So we would expect that the report that would be done would say, we vaccinated 700 shillings with the money you gave us, and the reason why we used the same amount of money was for reason A, B, C, D. So now, here you have the supplementary budget that has come to Parliament. It's of course factored in program-based budget format, and the appropriation bill is now a scaled version of that, with only the programs, with no indicators themselves of the amount of money being allocated per program. But also, it even gets worse when it comes to reporting the quarterly reports. That the quarterly reports do not report per program or further sub programs, but reports in a prose form. So, for anyone who does not interact with these documents now and then you miss, you are not able to relate on how actually the resources were spent. So next week, when Parliament Committee, led by Dede Nyoro, have submitted their feedback, to the House, the supplementary budget will still follows the same process of registration through the committee and submission of reports in the House, and ultimately, when it's been fully voted for, it will go to the president, for assent, for it to become law. However, we need to understand that our law allows government to spend if there is no appropriation bill approved by Parliament. The government is not stopping. There is nothing, if by the end of July we have not approved the budget, the supplementary budget, it does not mean that our civil servants will not be paid. The government is allowed to spend up to a maximum of 50% of the previous budget within the current vote spending. So that is the leeway they have until we can find alternative of approving, until there is consensus that actually this finance bill. Now, this supplementary conversation by all means presents us a very good opportunity now to engage strongly and team, Dedinyolo as the budget chair of the budget committee. And also remembering that we have a parliamentary budget office, which is an institution that is established pursuant to the PFM Act. And parliamentary budget office is staffed with with very skilled team that provides technical assistance to parliamentarians. Now, whether parliamentarians listen to what the parliamentary budget office team says or not, it's a different story. But what we know as the Institute of Public Finance and our interaction with parliamentary budget office is that the team that's at parliamentary budget office is a highly skilled team. And we have seen their reports that are publicly available and the recommendations they have made to Parliament. So this opportunity for engagement in the supplementary budget, engage on the finance bill and put Kimani Kuria to task, and many stakeholders did, it is still another opportunity to engage and question, for example, why are we still funding devolved functions in this budget? There is more than, to a greater extent, there is more than 100 billion in devolved functions in this budget. And these ones we should question. Considering, for example, that the Senate does not engage with the estimates, and which this, probably this was a constitutional oversight. Senate should be able, even Senate, to make its submission to the National Assembly and question why is it that the national government is still funding devolved functions at the national level? Why do we have National Irrigation Board in Nairobi undertaking irrigation in Mwea, for example, when the county government of Kirinyaga can go to do that work as a conditional grant, all with support, so that National Irrigation Board is left to oversee the policy conversation. The amount of resources allocated for the Ministry of Water and regional development authorities should be questioned to a minimum, and the government under the leadership of the president should be able to take a political risk on this one and say, for those regional development authorities, there is no allocation as we transfer the mandate. There should not be any funding for development, cut off. There should be any new development happening for any function that is devolved and still at the national level. We should be able to see Senate needs to wake up and safeguard the interests of the counties by demanding that none of the county functions being held at the national level should be funded. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maragori. And on that note, I want to open up the floor now. I've seen there's a lady called Ms. Madai who's joined the conversation. Ms. Madai is very, very big on matters of championing public participation on the budget making process. Ms. Madai, I've sent you an invitation to be a speaker, and you can accept that invitation and come in and speak. Let's hear from Tim. Tim Kiprono, you've requested to speak, PFM and open governance enthusiast. Tim, please go ahead.
Hello, guys. Eric, thanks for hosting this very interesting conversation, and the two gentlemen, to take us through, the budget process, but also the supplementary budget. Now, I think James and Julian have really raised a very, very important issues, starting with the last comment of, financing county functions at the national level. And I think there's just a rider on that to just, are we also then, financing this function at the county level? Because, there's very high chance of duplication. But I also think then, in terms of just making sure like our fiscal space, is kind of like, it's not constrained as it is right now, dealing with debt and a couple of other things, competing priorities. Should we then start, the conversation of auditing and costing, the functions afresh, so that we know which functions belong to who, and then those functions then follow resources. And then a question for James. So James, you mentioned, that Kenya does more than one supplementary budget, 1, 2, 3 sometimes. And I just left a comment, in terms of, looking at the credibility of the budget, because I mean, given that the budget becomes a binding document through the approval process at, National Assembly, are too many supplementary budgets an indication that, we have weak capacity to forecast, because if we are doing a supplementary budget because probably we think we are not going to raise the revenue that we anticipated at the beginning. Is that a sign that, we have weak capacity, or even combination of political, reasons? Because could it be that we are overestimating our revenue to meet, certain interests to just, inflate the budget for political reasons and things? And I would really appreciate that question. And then the last question, Eric, is, so we've talked about, funding new projects, but also then, completing ongoing projects. And I know you mentioned a couple of roads. And I'm just going back to, so we passed some regulations a while, like 2 years ago, the public investment regulations. And I also read a couple of articles, talks about the number of projects that are stalling or incomplete, including 700 on CDF alone. Then I'm asking myself that, we're struggling with resources to finance our development and service delivery. Could we also then be messing up our investment? Like, how did we decide on the road that, it's not complete, for example? So that's money that's lying somewhere. Because I mean, if the road is not complete, it means part of our money is lying somewhere and requires additional resources to finance that. Now, in terms of making choices for our investment, is it time for us to start thinking how we choose what to invest and where to invest, so that then, even before investing in a new road, then first of all, we have to complete whatever it was, it's not complete, so that we start thinking about our projects in terms of first project. So if our project is 2 phases, 3 phases, then we have to think about the next phase now, even as we're financing new projects for next year. So we say we have commitments for next year for projects that are not complete. So let's not fund new projects. So that then, James and Julian and the rest of us who are able to analyze budget, then analyze also then budgets from that perspective. Like, why are we, investing in a new project while there are a couple of projects that then needs to be financed? But also then looking at how do we decide on these investments and how do they impact the economy? I come from Marakwet. There's a road. There are 2 roads that go to my place from, they diverge from same place. So one is tarmac, and no one uses that road. Then I'm asking myself, the road that no one uses is actually tarmac, but the road that is busy and, people use every day is not tarmac. Then how did we arrive at that decision? And I know there's a lot of these roads, if someone was to do just, a quick assessment of different places. This is just a classic example. How do we decide on our investments in a way that whatever we invest, the scarce resources that we have, then it's able to impact on the economy and then the economy is able to generate the revenues that we want, to pay the debts and to finance our economic activities and so forth. I think I will leave it there for now.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tim. Let's hear from Eve Madai.
Thank you so much, Eric, and the rest of the panelists for holding this discussion. I'd like to start by saying that we should be very conscious of the fact that resources are scarce. So the government cannot be able to do or implement all projects in one financial year. So you'll find that most of the time they will spread this budget execution across several financial years. Also, it is important for us to prioritize well, and that's why we're having this discussion right now. And at the same time, adequately financing critical sectors that are human rights centered. So we want to avoid significant budget cuts on human rights centered sectors such as education and health. We should also note that the budget is a powerful tool that ought to provide for equity in the distribution of resources and cushion special interest groups, which are stipulated in the Constitution of Kenya. That includes youth, women, the elderly, and persons with disability. They say that when the winds of change blow, some build walls while others build windmills. So although the government thought the reject the finance bill was a setback, in my opinion, it was a win for the citizens, as it has given us a chance to trim the fat and reevaluate our budget priorities. The National Assembly has put out a call for public participation, but the bone of contention, as my colleagues in the PFM space here can attest to, is whether the public input will be accommodated or not. And most of the times it rarely is. So we end up going for public participation forums, giving our input, but when you look at the final approved document, the input is missing. So we need to be aware of that and ensure that this time round they are going to accommodate our input. So I want to touch a little bit on the education and health sectors. Julian had mentioned a bit about the allocation and the budget cuts in those areas. I have seen some significant cuts. Specifically for primary education, it's at 22%. And to put that into perspective, it's about 6.7 billion. For secondary education, there was a cut of 7.8%, which is approximately 8 billion. And for university education, at a time when some universities are protesting due to inadequate funding, has been cut by 4.7 billion. When it comes to the health sector, the State Department for Medical Services has been revised downwards by 7.1%, which is equivalent to 7 billion. And you should note that this particular department hosts the reproductive, maternal, newborn, and child adolescent health sector, which is also called RAMCA. So this is a huge concern, especially considering that the Linda Mama project has in the past faced a lot of budgetary constraints, which has subsequently affected access to services for pregnant women. This also comes at a time when doctors have been advocating for additional resources, hence the relentless strikes that we have been seeing in the country. So further budget cuts suggest that critical health services will become more strained. Then budget allocation does not guarantee that there's going to be disbursement, because we have seen a lot of delayed disbursement from the national government to counties and also to ministries, departments, and agencies. So in the past financial years, counties and ministries, departments, and agencies as well have faced issues of late disbursement of funds from Treasury. And additionally, these MDAs and the county governments have demonstrated an inability to exhaust their budget. So we have on one hand that the Treasury does not avail these resources on time. And when the resources are availed, these ministries, departments, and agencies or the county governments are unable to execute their budget. So as citizens, I think it's up to us to be abreast on how counties are implementing their budgets. As Julian had said before, we rarely participate during the implementation stage. So when I was looking through the supplementary budget, I noted some agencies, and I wondered how these allocations to these agencies are usually utilized. One of them was the Witness Protection Agency. It raises questions about its effectiveness and transparency, especially given the sensitive nature of its operations. So we should reevaluate some of these allocations to see where we can reroute this budget allocation to go into the human-centered sectors such as education and health. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you very much, Eve, for this. We also have one of the listeners in the conversation who are now designated as a speaker, former Cabinet Secretary Moses Kuria, who is a former member of Parliament and a former member of the Budget and Appropriations Committee who has participated in the budget-making process in Parliament. Moses, thank you for joining us. Come in. I'd like, first of all, to get clarity. You want to speak to us as a former minister, as a former MP, or as a voter and a taxpayer? Moses.
Thank you, Eric. I will speak and then you can decide as who. Because the facts are just the facts. But let me say that I rarely join spaces, but I saw this topic and it's one topic that is very close to my heart. And I think that the topic that we are discussing today is at the heart of all the issues that the country is grappling with. I would really have wished even to have this conversation on a wider audience, because this is really the crux of the matter. So I have followed the discussion, and I just want to say some few things. One, you asked a question, does the public get a chance to say, what they want in a budget? And the truth of the matter is, even before the budget policy statement that you mentioned, we have a chance in the sector working groups. Remember, the budget policy statement is a product of sector working groups, and the sector working groups is really the beginning point of the budget process. But there's still other things which I think the gentleman from the Institute of Public Finance can tell you. There are still other opportunities that exist before then. For example, there exists a checkpoint where public can interrogate the previous budget spending. And I think that is important, because what happens is that in this country, we come from one budget cycle, we finish, we go to another, and there is no audit of the previous one. Somewhere within the budget cycle, I can't remember exactly where, but I think James or the expert can be able to look at that. There exists an opportunity for people to say, how did we spend the money that was available the previous year? How was that appropriated? So I think that's the first one. But I think the most critical one, and I think that one of historical perspective is very important, because it ought to inform subsequent budget making. But nonetheless, before we develop the budget policy statement, the sector working groups, they normally start somewhere in KICC. I know of a lady called Mora. She must be in her 60s or something, or thereabout. She is the only person who goes to all these sector hearings. And the kind of conversation now that we have, if you could have the same level of conversation within the sector working groups, there's a lot. And I'm not saying that there's a guarantee that if people raise their voice within the sector working groups, that is going to, that the same is going to be catered for. But I'm told by my Luya friends that there's a Luya saying that someone who beats a stone says, even if the stone does not answer, on the very minimum, the stone has heard. So I think it's important to look at this process of the interventions that the public can make way before the 15th of February deadline for submission of the budget policy statement to Parliament. Then now fast forward to 30th of April. 30th of April is the date set by the PFM for submission of estimates and submission of the finance bill to Parliament. And I remember when I was a member of the budget committee, we engineered the change. I think in 2018 or thereabouts, I can't remember, 2017, where we said before the budget, the estimates and the finance bill were being submitted on different dates. And then we said, because we spend the money that we receive, something before, what was happening is that we pass the estimates, and then after passing the estimate, then we look at the finance bill. And of course, we have said we were going to spend 3 trillion or 4 trillion. Then that is passed. Then now we go back to the finance bill and say we can't release that particular money. That's when, in the wisdom of Parliament, we brought a convergence between the submission of the finance bill and the estimates into Parliament on the 30th of April. So that was aligned, and so therefore now we are able to look at revenue and expenditure at the same time. So the correct answer is yes, there exists an opportunity. 2, it has not been utilized by Kenyans at all. I'm not saying that even if they turned up, it could have made any impact, but it is important, to be on the right side of history, that many Kenyans do participate in that process. Probably with wisdom of hindsight and from what has happened is that probably as a country we need to be much more, to move with the times, and this public participation should look at more modern, ways of participation to enable it could be even cheaper anyway. If you can bring this thing to the public scrutiny, maybe through digital, through social media, through that, probably something that from what has happened that I think should be able to be looked at. I will revisit that soon. Let me move to the analysis of the supplementary budget as has been presented. And just to mention, because I was making some calls to consult people who are in the know, as some of you are making the contributions. And let me take the issue of transfer to county government. And I think James or someone has correctly said that we moved from 401 billion to 410. And for me, that was striking odd, because when we announced austerity measures, we did agree that everybody has to take a haircut, including county government. So this revelation for me was startling. So I've made some consultation. Some people have said, how can we come from 401 to 410 if really everybody is supposed to take a haircut on the budget? And the reality is, I don't know. I've had the figures of 120 in terms of the net down from 170. I really want to shed some light on that. The unknown to Kenyans, the impact of rejection of the finance bill, the one which is supposed to be somewhere around 350 billion. And then we said we're going to reduce that to 170 so that we borrow the 170 from the markets. And now that the saving has now dropped to 120. But that's only the 170 and the 350 was only part of the story. There's a bigger part of the story. In the financial year 2023-2024, we have something we call crossover. And this is one thing that, again, because we don't give a lot of attention to scrutiny of this budget process, that is one item that gets lost all the time. Crossover means, and I think the lady who has contributed last has spoken about something very important, that not everything that gets budgeted gets the money, gets the exchequer. I think that's a very important point. And let me start from that with this contribution. In the year 2023-2024, the crossover amount, meaning how much did we cross over with from the other year that we said this was our budget, but we didn't have the money to fund. In 22-23, the previous budget, we crossed over with 77 billion of unmet expectations from budgeted items. We budgeted all right, but budget is not equal to money. So we crossed over with 77. And then what we do is that when we open the new budget, we call it the first charge. So we tell MDAs, Ministry Departments and agencies, before you look at the money you budgeted for the current year, please look at, the people, so to avoid build-up of the pending bills. So we crossed over with 77 billion on our first year of administration, which for me was warning. I did raise that in several forums. But this year, in 23-24, we have crossed over with 250 billion shillings. That's staggering. That means that is the first charge. That means that that's the first thing you appropriate, because you promised me I budget for this road or for that water or for something, and you didn't give me the money, and now the year has passed. So this crossover has got two options. Either it is dropped. We say that after all, maybe there's no likelihood that that money is going to be spent, or two, it is revoted. So what this supplementary budget has done is actually a two-in-one. It's a budget, it's a supplementary budget to cut in line with the austerity. It's also a supplementary budget to revote some items of the crossover, which said surely you cannot punish people who had already prepared to spend simply because you didn't give them the money. As to how much of the 250 billion gets revoted in this, I don't know. I need to, do a tooth comb on the supplementary budget. But just to give you an example, the last month of the financial year, Treasury did not send money to counties. So there is an element of the money of the last month that was not sent to counties that has now been revoted into this year because counties are saying we had budgeted for this money. So now the figure, the apparent increase from 408 to 410 is, first of all, we moved from 408 down to, I think, by around 20, 30 billion thereabout. But then that has been now undone by the money that we didn't collect, or we didn't get enough money that we didn't set the counties there. So we really have a two-in-one, and the experts in here can do some number crunching to see how much of the crossover has been revoted and how much that has sort of seemingly diluted, the austerity as has been announced. Let me finish by giving my perspective on austerity generally, or just the holding of expenditure vis-a-vis. And I've had wonderful contributions from people on JSS, on this, on the province budget. Where are we increasing on? Why are we having more subtle decreases on recurrent expenditure, as opposed to development expenditure, which is more, the gradient is sharper on that, and I totally agree. The reason is very simple, and I'll be very, very, very honest here. The way our budget process is fatally wrong, and I think I've talked about this. You can just Google for all my contribution on for my 8 years that I was a member of the budget committee, that I tried to fix this issue. Forget even about my time in government. Our budget process is wrong because I want you to say a prayer for tonight. You need to say some prayers for the accounting officers. Some people call the principal secretaries, who are seemingly supposedly supposed to be in charge of budget. Unknown to people, the way our budget process works, even our accounting officers, they encounter the budget sometimes the same time with the public. They make their presentations the same way that people are saying, oh, we went for this public participation, it didn't amount for much. It's the same thing even within government. Because when we talk about mandarins, when we talk about a very deep interest. This for me is something very, very, very dear to my heart, because the budgets are owned by some characters called CFOs, the chief finance officers. And what will happen is that the CFOs will do the budget, then present to some desk officer somewhere in Treasury. So then Treasury will compile everything. By the time even that budget comes to cabinet, first of all, the timelines are very squeezed. Oh, we have got this constitutional timeline. We have to comply with 15th of February for BPS, and so the whole budget process is made at the at gunpoint. You can say that, and that gunpoint is a gunpoint of timelines. And if it is a problem for the public and for people, people who can be able to interrogate, it's even a bigger problem for people within government itself. And that's something that is, we cannot fix, these issues until we fix that issue. So we've been grappling with something called zero-based budgeting. And I want to refer you to a report that my committee did in I think 2016, under Mutaba Musimi. We had an audit, value audit, something called the value audit of the budget under Mutaba Musimi. Edward Ouko, then as Auditor General, is the one we contracted. That report is publicly available from parliamentary records. So that you can be able to see the value for money audit of budget, not just from a national government, but especially an audit of devolution and a question of whether devolution is answering to the needs of Kenyans. Now, so what needs to be done is because, as I conclude, the issue is what needs to be done. We need to provide more ample interrogation on the expenditure, and especially of recurrent expenditure. I am now from this conversation reminded of the terms of reference that we gave for that committee that's looking on debt, and by reflection from this space, I think it is important to expand the mandate of that team to also have a look at how we come up with our recurrent expenditure and to give the public a voice on recurrent expenditure. Because as I've been saying consistently again, that's where the animal lies. That's where the problem lies. To go for more modern ways of allowing the public to participate in the budget making process, not just going for some meeting in KICC or whatever spaces like this and digital that needs to be brought in space. And three, I have heard of something called Okoa Uchumi something, and I'm assuming that is a combination of several actors and players within the civil society or something like that. And I think that such kind of a meeting of minds need to be expanded to also include those guys in government who are, because otherwise you'll be speaking to yourself out there. I think a mechanism needs to be found whereby those wonderful ideas are also fed into those people who make policy. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Moses. James.
Thank you very much, Moses. And first of all, it is not lost to us that the current crisis we are in as a country right now was caused by the budget committee that you served in the last two parliaments. That budget committee in parliament was spineless. They bent to the whims of the executive and expanded the fiscal space that was there. And please, while we recognize the very strong contribution, I want to note that because the reports of the budget committee, and based on what was submitted by the executive, kept expanding and expanding. I also want to bring to your attention, I think you've been in parliament and government for so long, since PFM Act 2012 came into place, that the practice and the theoretical approach towards public participation in the sector working groups is very tokenistic. Sector working group reports are available at KICC for 5 days, and then that's it. We never see any ministry going to the counties to discuss the issues that find themselves in the sector working group reports that form the budget for the next financial year. In fact, this is the year that National Treasury has moved out of Nairobi to engage. And I'm talking this having been the one who does the open budget survey. And one of the things we assess is how sector working groups report are computed. Sector working groups reports, to a greater extent, are technocrats in government and donors, those who fund them. And it's okay, but we have to move public participation from a tokenistic perspective to a realization that it's a constitutional right to citizens to participate on that. And we are very grateful because you bring insights from a legislative and from an executive perspective that enrich this conversation. And key things you've mentioned, for example, I would agree to a greater extent from where I sit on us putting in more money in the supplementary budget to the counties, and cutting the largesse at the national government. We are leaving 85% of our taxes and at the national level, and 15% that goes to the counties. Service delivery happens at the counties, and that's why it's very important for all of us in this space today to ensure that you put in your feedback to the Budget and Appropriations Committee. Let's demand as citizens that counties should be funded properly. Just in case the UDA brigade has forgotten, The chapter on strengthening devolution in their manifesto committed to completing transfer of war functions, constitutionally earmarked as devolved function to counties within 6 months. It's 23 months later, or give or take 20 months later. I think we need to see none of those functions being funded at that level. And it is not lost to us, even as, as Moses was taking to us through, the crossover of around 77 billion. We know major part of it was the drive by the executive to overstate our revenue, and also failure by parliament to question the decisions around our revenue. While we have progressively seen our revenue increase, expenditure has shot up more than our revenues. And I think there is an opportunity to rectify that in this supplementary budget. As citizens, we cannot afford to give up on our country. And the basis of our country is the social contract between the state and its people. The state and its people. So we want to ensure that the state is not breaching the social contract. If it's the elderly, the stipends that they receive should be received as part of social protection. We cannot afford to have pensions obligations being defaulted, and also, for example, going into hospitals and there are no medicine. And that's why we find, for example, the allocation in the new health laws. We should be seeing more reforms around NHIF instead of creating new institutions that will require capital investments. While we have a brilliant fund that just needs to be invested in properly. Also, we should see much more investment in public finance oversight institutions. Thank you very much, and back to you, Eric.
Eric, just a quick follow-up on what the former CS has just mentioned in terms of the convergence between the finance bill and the appropriations bill, which happened in 2018. And certainly we did celebrate that move. But some of the feedback that a number of us, myself included, submitted about that was that convergence between the tabling of the estimates on the appropriations and the finance bill was not enough. What this country needs, and what we still suffer from today, is that we need to see the costing for finance bill items. And what do I mean by that? When the finance bill tells you we will introduce motor vehicle tax via that amendment to the Income Tax Act, it should tell us this is how much we are looking to raise from that, so that we align the appropriation side and the finance bill side on a like for like in terms of are the revenue measures countervailing the expenditure measures. What we have presently, and what regrettably that the budget committee failed to do, was to give us that perspective, because today we are given a ballpark figure. One of the things I raised on Twitter today, on X I should say, was that
on the other side of the road. So as I wrap up on this, dress code matter, that is, the position of the moment. But even then, we have all these standing orders. It's 1,195 pages of the National Police Service standing orders. But the question we should be asking ourselves is, how many, in the service? Because right now it's hard to tell whether it is a service, it's the National Police Service, or if it's a force still.
PLO, kindly proceed. We've lost you.
All right.
PLO, unmute yourself. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks.
Kindly proceed.
So I was saying right now, we have degenerated into
Go on, PLO.
We lost you again. Okay, even as police officers to identify themselves. And this is very important for you to note. And as citizens, you have to actually take precautions at every time. If an individual identifies him or herself as a police officer, then you have to request number, their practice number. There's a badge that is given to those officers to put on while they are discharging their duties, so that it's very easy to identify these individuals. What the National Police Service is doing is actually allowing individuals who might be involved in kidnappings or illegal offenses to actually arrest members of the public. And that's why we have concerns with regard to so that today there is someone who was kidnapped, who was abducted by police officers in Westlands, and there were the people around that space included uniformed police officers. It's very important that you demand for the identity of those individuals, even when they fail. And it's important that this episode was recorded because we can account to those faces. It's very important you also seek that they indicate to you which offense they are arresting you about, so that you already know that you're being arrested for a specific offense. Sometimes, and I know in most cases, they don't indicate who they are. They are wearing masks. They fail to identify themselves, and that's why we are in court today. Previously on this question, we are hoping that the court will give directions, even though the Constitution provides for these issues. And that's why we always run back to court to seek for interpretation and to seek for confirmation of violations, because it's only in court that we can confirm these violations and document the same to ensure that this does not happen to anyone else in the future. We can open up the discussion. I want to call Mr. Daniel. I think if you have spoken, kindly drop your microphone so that we can allow as many people as possible. Mr. Daniel, can you hear me? If Mr. Daniel, you can't hear me, Kisia, if you have the microphone, kindly. Kisia? Dr. Kasi? Dr. Kasim? Mohammed, can you hear me? Kisia, please proceed. If you have the microphone, I can see your hand. Kindly unmute yourself so that you are able to speak. Mohammed, are you there? Can someone confirm that my microphone is working kindly? Kisia? Engineer AM? Engineer AM, can you hear me? Free? Free, are you there? Steve, can you hear me? Mohammed Adan. Mohammed Adan. Mohammed, kindly unmute yourself. Mohammed.
Can I proceed?
Dr. Kisia, proceed. Dr. Kisia, proceed. We have had internet issues. Kindly proceed.
Okay. Mine is a question that has been asked by someone on the comments. He said that there are some people who were arrested in Bondo, but I think it was last week. So until now, they haven't been released. And upon inquiry today, they said that they were transferred to Siaya police station. So I don't know how that can be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Kisia. Free mind.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Kindly speak, we can hear you.
Okay. Mine is to appreciate the information that is being laid out so that people can be aware of the information that's done. So I hope we'll all meet tomorrow and we'll spend physically. Make sure we don't violate other people's and yeah, that's all for me. And then for the
Thank you. Thank you. Mtujazi, Kenya.
Hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Steve.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. It's an honor that you have considered people with not much of a following. So my question will digress from Article 37 of the Constitution, and we'll just inquire about. So the clarion call has switched from reject finance bill, and it went to Ruto must go. Now we are advocating for good governance and accountability in government. Now the question is, what will essentially happen if our president decides to resign? We know that that will be a difficult thing to come to reality, but there's a possibility. And if the possibility becomes reality, what might happen? I would like to get clarification on that, and thank you very much.
Thank you for those contributions. We'll go straight to Jasiri. I can see we have a number of legal experts within the space. Jasiri, kindly, if you have the microphone, you have 2 minutes. You can ask your question. Jasiri, can you hear me? If you can't, Mtujasi, if you have the microphone, please. Watchhawk, sorry. Okay. Kisia, you're back. Kisia, can anyone hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear. I think I'll drop the mic so that you can give.
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Manuel.
Kindly drop so that we can have the rest free mind. If you don't have the microphone, if you have the microphone and you don't have something to say, kindly drop the microphone so that other people can join. We have Gashi Mwaura, Mesha Kirwa. You have the microphones, kindly.
I think I can see PLO is back. His mic had dropped.
Yeah, PLO, thank you for coming back.
Hi, can you hear me?
If you have the mic. Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you, PLO.
Yeah, I was to finish up on my submission, so I don't know where you guys lost me, but I think I just take 2 minutes to finalize on what I was saying. And like I said, identification by police officers, is mandatory, and it only makes the kind of work that they're doing to be as transparent as possible. Because if you have so much to hide, and that only means you have to find dubious ways to try and address exactly what, the kind of hidden agenda you have against the protesters. So when you look at, again, the Standing Order number 24 under Chapter 31, on the dress code regulation for the National Police Service Standing Orders, it says, that despite the following instructions, with regard to, the fitting or wearing and even the upkeep of the police uniform and equipment, shall be adhered to at all times. And it gives a list of exactly what police officers should, by all time, have with them. And this includes the badges and of the rank, which shall be affixed, to the shoulder, straps with, wire pins, rings, the bayonet and the scabbard equally shall be worn on the belt, behind the left hip. The belt shall be worn fittingly, tightly around the waist and horizontally. And the police officers in police uniform shall tie, the same through the, retaining straps of the trousers, the cloth badges, with dome fasteners, all those kind of things, even the collar badges. So the identification comes as a package. So if a police officer doesn't have all this save for the police officers in VIP, protection, the internal affairs unit, the DCI, whose mandate actually even limited not to interfere, with protesters, because only one with ill motives and working in those three or the tripartite of the institution that I've mentioned will have a different motive to interfere with the protesters. So I hope the matters, filed by, LSK on compelling, police officers to be identifying themselves and do away with this kind of plainclothes, dress code, which I think for me is being used to address different agenda, and which is quite different from what, police officers are deployed on the streets to do. So with that, I think I'll get it back to you, Manuel, and I'll be listening in to more questions as time unfolds. So I'll just be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I think I need to recognize the presence of Steve. He's co-convener, Public Interest Litigation Committee of the Law Society of Kenya. Council member Steve, welcome. I can see Wakili Ndegwa and several other advocates listed up. Perhaps if you can take several other questions. Mr. Nyakwama Hamisi Dennis, if you can actually raise your questions. And then we can have Livingston, and then Justice. If you have the microphones.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening, kindly proceed.
Yes, I'm raising a concern about Kakamega. We have had a plan of mechanics who have been paid to go and counter the protesters, the peaceful protesters tomorrow. So I don't know it can be managed from the other side. Thank you.
Thank you. It's important to state that the mandate of the Law Society is limited to violations of the rights of individuals who exercise their rights under Article 37, there are issues that we are not able to address unless, of course, you supply us with that information. Remember that whereas we exercise our duty as an institution to perhaps challenge decisions and actions of individuals that actually undermine the rights under the Bill of Rights, it's very important that you know that we only act on the basis of the evidence presented to us. If you feel that indeed there are people who have been paid to undermine your right to demonstrate peacefully, then it's very important that you document that information and share it with the law society. We'll be able to take the necessary action, including challenging or taking the individuals to court and the individuals concerned in violating or actually curtailing your right to Article 37 and any other right under the Bill of Rights. Mr. Livingstone, are you there?
Yes. Oh, yes. Nyajeni.
Kindly proceed.
Oh, so mine is just directing my question to our LSK president about this.
We lost you. Are you there? Livingstone, are you there? Justus, kindly take over the microphone even as we wait for Livingstone. Justus Okumu. Paul. Jonette Paul.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening, kindly proceed.
Yeah, mine is, first of all, I want to thank the LSK for really guiding the people and helping us understand our rights under the Article 37 and the civic education you've done over through the times of these demonstrations and picketing as we really put the government into account. So my greatest concern about today is in an occurrence where an individual is abducted and, worst case of all, murdered. Does the accountability end at murder, or how does the justice end until? How does it come to justice until the said family of the victim feel justified? And my second question about what is going on currently at Mukuru Kwajenga, the Kware dump site. I would like to confirm, was there altering with the evidence that it was burnt the previous night? And in such a situation, how does the LSK counter so that the victims can find justice, as the citizen can find justice? Yeah, that's all.
Thank you for that question. I think the president has heard you. Madam President, if you are there, if you can address those two concerns, even as we proceed, if you're there. If you're not there, we can allow another advocate. Even as we wait for the president, Komwansa, are you there? Kevin? Council? Kevin Omwanza, kindly proceed. If you had the questions. PLO, are you there? Komwansa, proceed.
Yes, I could just ask him to repeat the question kindly.
I think he asked two questions about the abductions and murder. Does it end at murder? Does the process end at murder? And what is supposed to be done after a person is found to have been murdered? He also asked a question about the Kware dump site, and the banning of the crime scene and what is supposed to be done? Those were the two questions, Kevin.
Well, first to the first question, if he calls it murder, of course, we have the penal code, and the penal code, of course, provides for the penal consequences for an act of murder. It's a capital offense. If investigations are done and the officers who are involved are found, then the law will take its course. But then again, I get the where he is coming from, because he's asking this question in the context of the protests that are ongoing and the abductions, and of course, when somebody is abducted in such a nature and killed, it complicates the whole thing, because then it's difficult even to identify the perpetrator, because some of the perpetrators are in uniform. It's a special kind of a crime, but still, if there is goodwill from the security agencies and they decide to investigate and the officers are found, then it will be treated as any murder. You remember the Willie Kimani case, when the officers were implicated in the murder of Advocate Willie Kimani and the other people who were in the taxi with him. The officers were prosecuted and they were convicted and they were sentenced. Now, the same applies to abductions. Now, to the second part of your question, what happens to Mukuru Kwanjenga now that they have banned the crime scene? I listened to the director at DCI and when they were doing a presser in the morning, and they termed the place as an active crime scene. It baffles me as it does you that they had to burn it up if they actually did it. And I think that is something that we will, as the Law Society of Kenya, perhaps you'll need to look into and provide direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kevin. Meshach, are you there? Meshach Kirwa. And even as we get Meshach on the speaker, I think we have Mugweru. James, if you have the microphone, kindly if you can ask your question so that at least we're able to take a couple before a response is issued. We have Justice. Martin, kindly unmute yourself and address your concerns. Martin. There have been allegations about banning the crime scene at Kware. And I think as the president indicated earlier, of course, we are following up the process keenly. And even as Kevin has answered the question of murder, as to whether the process ends at murder, it doesn't end there. If you committed the offense of murders, as Kevin has indicated, it's a capital offense. We have to follow it up to the end to ensure that the people who committed those offenses are brought to book. Of course, there's the narrative that has been presented by the DCI. And of course, if they are in control as they purport, we expect that they need to give a report as to what happened and when it happened, and perhaps investigate, because they have capacity, resources to investigate and report to the members of the public as to what transpired and how those bodies were found there, and whether they are victims of the demonstrations or they are victims of a serial killer, as they actually indicated. So what it means to say that the place is it's a crime scene, it means that they are still investigating and they are fact-finding. It's important to note that they have that duty, and sometimes it's very difficult, us as the law society, to interfere with an investigative process. It is their mandate, but we have a duty to hold them responsible and accountable in the information that they actually share to the public. And so we'll continue to find out and continue to record the bodies being discovered and profile them in terms of ensuring that justice is met in terms of the families of the deceased person getting closure in terms of facts as to what transpired and how these people's lives were taken away. Junette, are you there? Janet, Paul.
Hello, you can hear me? Okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm still here. So, considering there is a point I want clarification. Considering how the abductions happen and there is no one who is taken to any police station, and there is no recording of the arrest and everything. It just happens chini ya maji with the rogue cops who, as PLO mentioned, they have no name tags, no uniform, so you can't even be sure if they are cops or not. Is it some kind of hard to follow up on who did what, why, and how?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We can take one more. Evans, can you hear me? Or Martin? Kindly, if you don't intend to speak, it's always important to switch off your microphone. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, it's interesting that my question was just asked by the person, by Janet, who just spoke. But on top of that, I first also wanted to give the Law Society of Kenya your flowers. The lawyers have not only been part of helping those people who have been arrested, say whether they are activists or content creators or anyone from Kenyan, you guys have been able to come through, and also the filling in the gap of information. I believe that is the biggest role that you guys have played, and for that, kudos to you guys. Keep it up and keep informing people of what they need to know. But otherwise, Junette has already asked what I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know whether PLO you're able to respond to that question quickly so that we take another.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, proceed kindly.
Well, on the issue of follow-up, I think that's the question that was asked by one of the patriots on this particular space. Follow-up isn't a problem, especially for rogue officers or thugs in uniform. Uniform is in court because the kind of regalia and paraphernalia, they're putting on is not synonymous to what, police officers who are governed by ethics, who are governed by the National Police Service Act and the regulations, who are governed by the National Police Service standing orders, or and equally our own constitution should not be behaving that way. So LSK, does its work to, at the end of the day, to protect, to defend, and to uphold the rule of law, and that will mean compliance, with what is happening, beyond compliance, follow-up, accountability, and transparency of what is happening beyond, the LSK as a society and as a body. So accountability for these rogue cops, and I think LSK has been on the trail of just trying to gather what they need to gather, just to bring to book the perpetrators and people who are unleashing unnecessary terror on the citizenry against what is required below, officers who kill at will, officers who maim at will, officers who perhaps abuse, misuse their powers because at the end of the day there's someone who has their backing. But as as Dr. Martin Luther King once said, that the arc of the moral universe is so long, extremely long, but someday when it bends towards justice, it bends, and there is no other escape route. So LSK will keep on doing the kind of work they do to monitor, the situation, and just at the end of the day, the lives that we lost, the wrecks, Kanyekis, and tons of others that we lost along the way. At least the death wouldn't be in vain, because what we want, not just as lawyers, but because we are first citizens, before we become lawyers, and our duty, is to amplify, the voice of the members of the public, to be there for them when they need us, and just to be the third eye, and check on the excesses of power across, all organs and state agencies. So yeah, the follow-up will be there, and it's been there, it's ongoing. So when we have all these people, brought to book, on the evidence, that we have collected, and the ODPP hopefully, shall approve the same to kickstart, the trial process, watching briefs for the victims of all, these excesses, meted on them. Yeah, that we shall continue doing, and we've always done. And we will continue doing, even when tomorrow dawns, and in the other days as well. So I think with that, Manu, I have responded to the question. So again, keep asking questions rather, and we will be here to respond. So back to you, Manu. Thanks.
Thank you, PLO, for those submissions. I can see Dr. Miguna. If you have the microphone,
yes.
Perhaps if you can proceed.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. I want to express my gratitude to the Law Society for being patriotic and for stepping in to defend the rights of Kenyans that have been seriously subverted by the members of this current regime. I had a question asked which I wanted to attempt to answer, not as an officer of the Law Society of Kenya, but as a member of the Law Society of Kenya and as a citizen of Kenya. The question that was asked, and I don't think it has been answered, is what happens when William Ruto resigns or when we remove him from power, as might happen tomorrow. I believe that this is more of a political question than a legal question, but I'll answer both ways. First, I've often said, and many people have, and I can see NATO is in the body of the listening, we maintain that the citizens of Kenya have full rights under Article 1.1 of the Constitution to take their sovereign power in their hands and exercise it in accordance with this Constitution by stating to William Samoei Ruto that due to the numerous issues that have arisen, issues of tyranny, issues of abductions, issues of looting, issues of failure to listen to the country, proceeding to order his troops to pass the Finance Bill 2024 that had been widely rejected by the country. They no longer have confidence in his leadership. They have essentially voted with their feet and have impeached him in the popular cathedral, which is the streets of the Republic of Kenya. Having done that, under Article 146 of the Constitution, which says that the office of the president shall become vacant if the holder of the office, A, dies, B, resigns in writing addressed to the Speaker of the National Assembly, or otherwise ceases to hold office under Article 144 or Article 145, or under any other provision of this Constitution. Which means that under Article 146C, the people can withdraw their support that they gave, the power that they donated to the president under Article 1, and can decide to exercise it directly. Once they do that, I submit, and I've suggested this elsewhere, that because the people have also expressed their dissatisfaction in the manner in which the National Assembly conducted itself on June 25th, and therefore rendered its judgment against the Speaker and members of that assembly, plus even the Senate, because of the passage of the conflicts of interest bill, the people may decide through a consensus to nominate the Chief Justice of the Republic of Kenya to sit over a transitional process which would constitute or reconstitute the IBC and conduct fresh elections, and or do any other thing that the people deem fit. That is my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Miguna, for those contributions. And I think we have heard you loud and clear on the suggestions that you've made. At this juncture, Abdurrahim, you have the microphone.
Thank you so much. My name is Abdurrahman. I am in Mombasa. I want to thank, first of all, the Law Society of Kenya for the role they have played in this struggle, for standing up for the citizens that were wrongly accused and arrested and those that were abducted. Sometimes this journey can be so scary and lonely, but with your support and your comradeship, it becomes easy and fascinating. My question, I'm seeking a legal opinion concerning citizens' arrest. The question of infiltration by goons and state-sponsored attackers that could infiltrate peaceful protests, as we are planning to protest tomorrow in the streets of Mombasa. We have organized ourselves into groups, especially for males, that are going to be notifying and identifying errant looters and people snatching probably smartphones and handbags from mostly females and members of the public, and destroying property in the streets of Mombasa City. So we needed a legal opinion from the Law Society concerning what are the laws that guide citizens arrest. How can we arrest such people, and what are the limits maybe that should not be what are the limits that should not be crossed, so that lest we are not accused of assault and probably all that maybe. So in citizens arrest, what are the procedures and what does the law say about arresting someone that has come to infiltrate a peaceful protest and causing maybe looting, snatching, and destroying public property and burning vehicles? Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. We can take one more, Dio. Dio Kendrick.
Oh, thank you so much. And thanks to LSK for this forum and for the support we've had so far during this struggle. Mine is with regards to the national flag, which has become our symbol during the demonstrations. And I just want to know, what are my limitations of using the flag? I bought one, and am I legally allowed to hang it, say, on my window or somewhere in the house, or where am I limited so that I don't also break the law while I use the flag during my the process of demonstrating us? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have KD.
Yeah, I'm here. How you guys doing?
We're
I'm
fine.
just
Can you
thankful. Thank you for everything. Thank you, LSK. Thank you, Madam President. We have a lot of faith in you, and I just have been trying so much to be on, like say, pass on my questions. But I think most of the Kenyans really want someone to listen to them, which is very, very impossible. I believe a good leader listens, unlike what we have in our country. Maybe just a suggestion, if it really makes sense, if you guys can actually have a YouTube channel that you can upload all these talks on, because sometimes it's very hard to keep up with, so that you can just know you have like a particular talk you can actually go and listen to at your free time, because sometimes it's hard to follow up on everything. But just to get to my questions, the first thing I wanted to ask is with regards to the first incident that happened when these demonstrations came up, and the parliament was, I won't say intruded, and people got into parliament. And my main question comes with regards to the mace. So it was said that the mace that was in parliament was a dummy mace. Is it legal to have a dummy mace, especially when you're passing the law of the land in parliament? And we know, or rather the speculations that are going on, that some of the reasons why we had the massacre in Githurai was because the mace was being sought after. So can the mace be replaced if it is stolen? Or what does it call, for example, if the people took the mace from the parliament and it goes missing? Can the government just go ahead and replace it with another mace? That's my first question. The second question is with regards to the abductions. So if a plainclothes cartel comes to arrest me and abduct me, rather, and I have neighbors around me who are actually looking, and they can actually understand what is happening, they know it's illegal, can they protect me, or is it unjustified? We know we can get afraid because they have ammunition and stuff like that, but I saw a clip somewhere whereby a man was being abducted, and his two sons, almost I think 4 years old, they came and grabbed his legs. It's all over social media. I believe some of you have watched it already. But the question is just, can I defend my brother or sister from any abduction, even if it means, because we have strength in numbers. I don't know how possible that is. And then the last question is to the LSK as a body. I believe most of the legals in Kenya are members of the LSK. And you realize most of the people are coming out. We are coming out to you for knowledge to us, number one. Number two, we're coming to you for sensitization on the understanding the constitution, which is a major problem in the country. And then thirdly, we just need someone to talk to. However, it's so unfortunate that some of the people who are putting us in this situation are lawyers who are actually not sensitive on what it means by being illegal. The members of parliament, most of them are lawyers, and they end up passing laws, but we know they have a lot of graft issues and some very integral backgrounds. What can the LSK do with regards to these particular individuals in terms of, like, say, trying to bring them out so that we can actually have a body that we know is independent and has a grasp that can actually be able to get rid of all these guys who have a bad reputation. For us not to say the lawyers have this A, B, C, and D. We know a lawyer can actually go represent someone in court and they get compromised and a case becomes invalid or null. How does the LSK as a body govern or rather protect itself from such individuals who end up now tainting the image of the whole whatever profession? You realize you're the only profession who actually go with the term "my learned friend." You know, we really respect you, but there are some people who just end up spoiling everything for your good work. I think I'll leave it at that for the other people as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for those questions and contributions. I will allow...
Mano, can you hear me?
Yes, PLO.
So I
If
can,
you can address some of the
I can
concerns
take up.
kindly so that we don't have it.
I can.
Yes.
I can take up the one on national flag and parliamentary mace. Yeah. So the patriot who asked about the national flag. I mean, the scope, you know, I mean, should you display it whatever, or should you carry it with you? So when you look at Article 9 of our Constitution, it talks about the national symbols and the national days. And one of those national symbols of the Republic, that is Kenya, is you have the national flag. Of course, the national anthem, the coat of arms, you know, the public seal, those are just extras. But the national flag is one of the national symbols. I will again refer you to a statute that equally talks about or establishes the national flag, the emblems, and the names. So that is the National Flag, Emblems, and Names Act, Cap 99 of the laws of Kenya. It's a very, very old act which I think should be repealed by now because it has overstayed its use. Because it first commenced its force of law on 10th of December 1963, and then after it was assented to on 9th of December 1963. So those are close to 50 plus years technically of having this statute, and with the emerging, you know, jurisprudence, then I think it's high time Parliament, you know, saw it fit to repeal, you know, this kind of legislation. So what this particular statute provides when it comes to the national flag, I just take you to Section 3. Section 3 of this particular statute talks about the prohibition of improper use of emblems, names, and likeness. And there is another one on prohibition of display of certain flags. So the wording of this Section 5 of this particular statute is that no person shall display at any place or on any premises any flag or banner, or even permit any flag or banner to be so displayed, you know, being in either case a flag or banner other than a specified emblem which is reputed to belong or is held out by any authority as belonging to the territory of Kenya or of any particular part thereof other than the area of a local authority. And then it goes ahead to talk about that any person who contravenes this particular subsection 1 under section 5 shall be guilty of an offense and liable to fine not exceeding 5,000 shillings or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 6 months or to both such fine and such imprisonment. And then the last subsection under this section 5 talks about this particular provision of the law applying or binding the government. But here's the gist. The same particular statute talks about, display of flying of national flag on a motor vehicle. And as it currently provides, it talks about the president, the deputy president, the chief, justice, the cabinet secretaries, the speaker of the National Assembly, speaker of the Senate, all those kind of people. But the question we should all be asking ourselves, if the display of such national flag as a treasure and as a national symbol actually displays, our own, ethics, our own, integrity, our own kind of conduct and moral compass as a people. So it shouldn't be an offense for someone to carry with him or her flag to the protest. It shouldn't be an offense because technically, that's what, patriotism should be all about. And legally, because we have quite a number of statutes that were enacted, prior to the, Constitution of Kenya 2010, and some of these statutes to date are not in compliance with the Constitution. So freedom of conscience is one of the rights provided under our Constitution. So if your conscience, which should be respected by the state, to carry with you whatever national flag of our country, whatever size it is, to as a symbol of, protest against excesses perpetrated by the government, then by all means do. So you carry your flag because there shouldn't be any offense. At the end of the day, is our own constitution should be our guiding, star. So in as much as we have statutes that are not fully in compliance with our constitution, then it only means Parliament has much more work to do, to try and revise all these, I would call them a cake, or even defunct statutes, because some of the, provisions I keep reading, in all these statutes that were enacted prior to the 2010 Constitution, most of them have been either overtaken by events or they still, maintain what we call the rigidity of, of a way of people or a means of livelihood, by the Kenyan, citizen. So you carry your flag tomorrow, please, by all means, be proud of it, and show the kind of affection that you need to show as a proud citizen who wants the best for their country, as a citizen who wants accountability, as a citizen who wants transparency, as a citizen who wants the government to account for every cent of public funds. Yeah, so that is it when it comes to the national flag. So on the parliamentary mace, well, a mace technically is a symbol of authority of any parliamentary proceedings, just to begin, and it shouldn't cost more than even a single life, and it shouldn't compel the state to unleash terror on its people because of something that can easily be replaced. Because when you look at our own country, I think what is ailing us most is we don't have strong institutional foundations. And by strong institutional foundations, I mean institutions, that, speak, to the language that its people would want to speak, on. And as you've seen, our parliament, in as much as we have, this particular mace, which is technically, sanctions any proceedings in Parliament, and I know Parliament, could replace this, but the fact that today, and in this modern dispensation of political climate, I think the legislature hasn't lived up to its expectation, even a modicum of it, because it is seen as an appendage and extension of the executive. And I would just give you two examples why, I would maintain that particular assertion. One, when the report of the consideration of the Finance Bill 2024 was to be tabled before the National Assembly, as by law, required, and as the standing orders of the National Assembly require, the chairperson of the Departmental Committee of the National Assembly, that is Honorable Kimani Kuria, who is, the representative from Molo, went to State House to give a press briefing on a report that he had not tabled before the National Assembly. State House does not make any laws. It is Parliament that is the legislative arm of government. It makes laws. I mean, it is an oversight, body. It is a representative body based on the powers we have delegated as a people, to them, directly and indirectly to the powers we have equally bestowed upon the, judiciary and even the executive. So the fact that you have, a legislator technically giving a press briefing, apparently based on the concessions of, a bill that was still subsisting before the National Assembly, tells you all you need to know. Because what business does State House have, to interfere with the legislative process that underwent public participation in compliance with Article 10 of the Constitution? And what then does it say about the credibility of the report for the consideration by the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning when it comes to the authenticity of the contents thereon? So you have, so many questions to ask yourself, in terms of where exactly does Parliament stand? Does Parliament represent the people, or does Parliament represent the executive? So, like I said, a mace is something that can be replaced. But nonetheless, if we had, working institutions, then Parliament should have been an independent institution, free from the shackles, of the executive that, perhaps control exactly what, they should do. What bill should be passed? How should you pass this bill? What are the kind of quote unquote concessions, that need to be made for this particular report to reflect, the agenda that the executive has, in terms of accelerating its promises on the manifestos, if at all they've even done, close to a quarter of that. That is subject for another day. But Parliament should be held accountable, because technically they have our direct power that we have delegated. And the fact that that particular mace was withdrawn, I would call it, being withdrawn. It wasn't stolen. That mace was withdrawn on the basis of, it was symbolic, because when you withdraw a mace, it means you have withdrawn the delegated power that we gave to the, members of Parliament to represent us and not represent the, executive, members. Yeah, so I think with that, I've answered both questions. So back to you, Manuel. You can handle, the rights of the arrested persons in compliance with Article 49 of the Constitution. Thank you.
Emmanuel, permit me. This is Ndegwa.
Thank you. Ndegwa, just before we bring
just
you
to add-
in, perhaps.
All right.
Yes, just proceed.
I
then.
want to just add something.
If you are addressing the same question.
I just wanted to add something about the question of the mace and the fate of Parliament following the event that unfolded. The mace is not an instrument that is to be taken with a light touch. The mace is the authority that the Constitution speaks about under Article 1, about the power and the sovereignty of the people. It should be noted that in the Westminster parliamentary system, Parliament cannot transact business in the absence of a mace. And it has a long history dating back to the 14th century and the 13th century. Previously, the mace, or rather the mace, has always been a symbol or an instrument that was supposed to protect the monarch. And it was really historically a symbol, a weapon that was supposed to protect the monarch. And that is why it's always carried or held by a sergeant at arms who was at the disposal of the monarch at that time. Historically, it must be remembered that when we started the Legi Corps in 1958, is when His Majesty the King of England brought a mace from the Parliament of England to Kenya. It must be remembered that when we started the Legi Corps, the mace itself was brought from England, and it was brought by the governor himself. In 1963, when we attained independence, the mace was again introduced to Parliament by the late His Excellency Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. Since then, the mace has never, ever been withdrawn from the precincts or from the sittings of Parliament. It tells you, therefore, that for all those periods historically, the mace has always been within the precincts of Parliament and a symbol of authority from the people. So the question of withdrawal of the mace signifies the withdrawal of the supremacy of the people of Kenya. The supreme people withdrew the authority of Parliament. Remember, this Parliament was constituted by the people. So when the people exercised this aspect of withdrawing the mace, it signifies to me that the Legislative Assembly, where the mace belonged, authority was equally withdrawn. It doesn't matter whether the mace was made of wood. It doesn't matter whether it was made of timber. It doesn't matter the material, the gold. The fact is that at the time when the mace was being withdrawn, Parliament was in session. Therefore, Parliament lost its authority to reconstitute and constitute itself until such a time when the mace must be reintroduced procedurally to Parliament. That is to mean that if in 1958 the mace was introduced by the governors at then, in 1963 it's Jomo Kenyatta who introduced the mace. It therefore mean the mace also being a link between the executive and the legislature, then there must be a ceremonial aspect within which this mace was must be reintroduced. But then there must be a conversation whether the people want the reintroduction of the mace into Parliament, because the Speaker cannot just go perhaps to karaoke introduce the mace. Number two, with the current existing constitutional dispensation, where we are saying that we are purely presidential system, and we have seen historically the mace being introduced by either the monarch or the president, in a purely presidential system where the president plays almost no role in aspect of legislation, who then shall introduce or who then is fitted to reintroduce this mace in Parliament? To me, those are serious constitutional issues that must be relooked, and we cannot just wish away the aspect of the withdrawal of that mace. One, it was withdrawn when Parliament was in session. Number two, it was withdrawn by the people. Number three, historically, the mace has always been introduced by the president or the governor. And now we have a purely presidential system where the president plays no role. Then who is to reintroduce this mace? And the failure to reintroduce this mace, therefore, what is the fate of Parliament? Can Parliament still convene? Can Parliament still constitute itself? Can Parliament still legislate? To me, before I think the Assembly reconvenes and gets from its recess, those are fundamental issues that requires to be resolved. Thank you.
Thank you, Wakili Ndegwa, for those contributions. And I think you've answered the questions that PLO equally weighed in on the symbolism. I think it's important to appreciate what was indicated earlier by PMO, that some of the statutes we are relying on the national emblems, flag, and basically the symbols of national unity are basically for symbolism. There is no law under the Constitution of Kenya 2010 that actually inhibits any member of the public to display the national flag. It's a symbol of national unity. It doesn't have specific individuals to actually run the flag. Of course, you remember there was a case in court with regard to the question as to whether county governors, the governors of our respective county government, can be able to run, the flags in their cars. And of course, to that extent, of course, the court had to interpret. But when it comes to citizens, because these are symbols that are supposed to unite us, not separate us, not distinguish us. Running with your flag, or rather any other national emblem, it's a constitutional right. It's like if you limit someone to display the Kenyan national flag, it's like limiting them to sing the national anthem, because they serve the same purpose of actually uniting and bringing people of the Republic of Kenya together. I will invite Ochel Dudley to address the question of the citizen arrest, and I think that question has not been addressed. Someone asked the question about uploading these conversations on YouTube, and I believe, Madam President, you have heard that. It's a challenge from the members of the public that this information is supposed to be displayed, perhaps on the social media spaces, to enlighten the public on the questions of law and the interpretation of the law when it comes to Article 37 and the other provisions of the law regarding the Bill of Rights. Kindly,
I think, Banamano,
don't leave
before you even
it.
proceed, before Chiel pick up, I wanted to weigh in and add further. And saluting all the patriots who are present tonight. There's on the issue of the flag. For the longest time, as Kenyans, we have been sold fear not to associate with our country, and that has made us to not act as proper patriots. So whoever, and I saw some people even trying to sell the same fear to the families of our fallen soldiers when they used the flag to wrap the coffins, that is improper and against the law. And we wanted to assure the members of the public that it is very much in order to associate with our flag, to raise it high as much as we can, because we need to remember Article 1 of the Constitution. It recognizes the sovereignty of this country belongs to we the people, and it is exercised by all those people in government by way of delegation. So we are the ones who have delegated the powers. So, and if we have delegated the power for them to use, means that power also is with us as citizens of this country, and we should not be ashamed to hold it high and as a sign of patriotism to this nation. And I also think the issue, as Mr. Ndegwa Njiro has mentioned, on the fact of the mess, I do agree with the submission and further comment that the aspect of trying to portray that it was not the original maize or all those issues the parliamentarians have been trying to push forward as a narrative to counter the magnitude of what it means to withdraw such a maize is clearly trying to mislead Kenyans. And without
Dudley, you're arrest any individuals who will want to, snatch mobile phones of the people who are peacefully demonstrating, or individuals who want to commit offenses at the vicinity of the members of the public, and how and whether the members of the public can be able to arrest them. Thank you.
Okay, I think I've seen that happening before. Maybe the first and second protests, there were people who were arrested and handed over to the police somewhere around Tomboya and Archives.
Dudley, you're not clear.
Okay. I'm saying that I think the question of citizens' arrest is something we've seen happening before. If you remember the first and second protests, there were people who were arrested and handed over to the police. But then on a pragmatic level, on a practical level, you also need to be mindful of your safety. If the goon is armed, you possibly can't arrest them. They could injure you or harm you. So it's also a matter of pragmatism. And if you'd allow me to add something further to the flag question, our constitution says that all law that preceded the constitution should be read with the necessary modifications, amendments, alterations to bring it into conformity with the current constitution. So we need to test some of these colonial laws. The flag statute is a colonial statute. It was meant to preserve the colors of the flag.
I'm sorry, Dudley.
Kindly, Dudley, unmute and proceed.
Okay. I was saying that on the flag question, the Flag Act is a colonial statute.
We have lost you, Dudley.
Dudley, are you there? Kindly.
He's muted. Unmute and speak up. Okay. You can pick some other speaker.
Wallo, kindly, you can, as we wait for Dudley's microphone. Wallo, if you can address your question, you have the microphone. If Wallo is not there, Morara. Wallo, kindly proceed. I can see your hand. Kindly unmute and proceed.
Thank you very much. I think all of us had been muted there for a second, but we are okay now. Now, mine is just a small question. I think I'm taking you back to Article 1. And I was having a conversation today, and I just wanted some clarity from our legal minds. You can help us understand. Now, Article 1 says we can exercise our rights either directly or indirectly through a representative. Now, if you can explain to me very easily, in the easiest of terms, how we are supposed to exercise it directly, assuming that we actually push the government to the wall to a point where, say, the president says, you know what, this is too much, I resign. And then the deputy, we say we don't want Rigathi. Rigathi says, you know what, I came with the president on one ticket. If he goes, I go. And we don't want the speaker or whatnot. What happens next if we push the government to the wall? How do we then now exercise ourselves, represent ourselves directly, knowing very well that power abhors a vacuum? And I know at some point the good barrister Dr. Miguna had
addressed this, but I'd like some clarity on the same issue. How do we now get to a point where we don't slide to anarchy and find ourselves at the mercy of the military? Thank you.
Thank you, Wallo. Dudley, I think you're back. I don't know whether your connection is clear so that you can finish on your point and addressing the questions. If you can respond if you're back. But we can still take another question. We haven't had a lady address Sylvia. Sylvia, as we wait for Dudley, kindly. Sylvia, you have the microphone.
Good evening, everyone. Hello.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, I just have one question about what happened today and the propaganda that the government threw at us about that guy who is being accused of, he admitted of killing all those people. My question is, what if it was just a way of the government to silence us, and then in the end they come out to say that there is no enough proof or something? What will happen to the DCI who came outrightly and deceived the citizens? And now how will justice be served to those people who are just left without closure?
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Sylvia. First, I think even as we wait for the advocates on this forum to address that question, let me first say that the government has a duty, and the security agencies particularly have a duty to ensure that they investigate and prefer prosecution to the DPP for purposes of actually instituting proceedings against individuals who have been identified to have committed the same offenses. And so, of course, the reason why we are monitoring this process is because we want utmost transparency as the Law Society of Kenya. We'll be following up on the law games with the process of investigation, and we'll actually call them off because that's part of our duty as the Law Society to check our government institutions and find out whether they actually deliver on their mandate. The question of citizen arrest, you have a right to arrest a person who commits an offense in your presence. And this is very important. If your phone is snatched by an individual and you have capacity to arrest them, as Dudley indicated, you can proceed and arrest them. Present these individuals before a police officer. If they refuse to actually apprehend them based on the offense they have committed, find means and ways to present this individual to a police station, demand for an occurrence book number for that offense, and perhaps then at that juncture you can be able to request the Law Society of Kenya to follow up on that. At the same time, we will hope that these officers can be able to follow on that offense and perhaps institute investigations and recommend prosecution as the law requires. But I think Dudley indicated that it's very important for us to also be very careful. Citizen arrest is a serious process, and it may lead to personal injury, personal, you might be able to be hurt in the process of arresting this person, and that's why this right to the citizens to arrest individuals has almost all the time not been exercised properly. So it's very important that at least when you are conducting this citizen arrest, you ensure that you record these occurrences, you are able to substantiate the offense that is these individuals undertook. And at the same time, the more witnesses you are, the better, because an offense is an offense. And whereas you have that right, you are taking up the duties of the investigative agencies, and you're attempting to actually ensure that individuals take up responsibility for the offenses they do. And so be very careful even as you do it, because at the end of the day, nobody wants any casualties as a result of the process. If there are police officers within your vicinity, identify the people violating those rights or committing those offenses, and draw those police officers to those offenses. Ensure that you get identity of those police officers, so that when they refuse to take action, you're able to say, we reported to a police officer within the vicinity of the occurrence of the offense, but they refused to take action. And for that reason, we feel that they undermined our right to apprehend a person who committed an offense. I can allow several other speakers to come in. Engineer AM, you've been having the microphone for some time. I don't know whether you have something to say. We have James. James, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Kindly, if you can proceed in a minute or two and address your concerns.
Okay, I have like 3 to 4 questions. The first is there are so many bills that has been passed, e.g. on health bills and agriculture bills that are exposing our economics and health as people. How are we going to do about that in order to return our nation into normalcy? Second question, how can we hasten the process of restoring our country since everything is not working as we still demonstrate? Another question, can I fly the national flag on my car? Then there is another question, what steps has LSK taken regarding auditing of our national debts? If those concerns can be addressed, maybe I can be more comfortable of my country.
Thank you. Thank you for those questions that you have raised. Nelson?
Hi, thank you for the mic. I just have one question. So I know some of you are aware that I exposed the PPP on JKIA, and it's shredded with a lot of secrecy. And I just wanted to ask the lawyers to explain to us the PPP Act and what Murkomen and Kositani and his team did. Is it legal what they did? Just let us know, what the PPP Act has and what are the provisions, what they can do without public participation, what they cannot do without public participation, this kind of thing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. PLO, are you there? Kindly, if you can pick some of those questions that have been addressed to us.
Oh, you can hear me?
Yes. After you, we can have Ndegwa, perhaps the same questions.
All right, thank you. So there was the question on, I was listening to what one of the patriots was asking about the health bills, the agriculture bills, different kind of bills generally, and what exactly are we doing about it, and how best can we, can we challenge, that which is not pleasant to our ears as citizens? Well, the legislative process, it's a whole, scope. It begins with the pre-publication scrutiny of a bill. once it's fronted, to the departmental committees of either the National Assembly or standing committees of the Senate. And if it's, money bill through the Budget and Appropriations Committee, before again it's channeled to the Finance and National Planning Committee, depending on the context and whether the bill is a public bill or a government-sponsored bill, or if it's a private bill or an ordinary bill, and the modalities of the same. So where we do come in as citizens is we could come in through, articulate term of the Constitution during the draft stages of this particular bill. The same way we have the ICTA draft bill undergoing, intense public participation, and I am not pro that bill because it's a rebirth of, a bill that was shot down in the 12th Parliament, and it is only rekindled, but with a different, kind of approach. But the script is just the same. So where, you could come in now through the draft stages now, this because the ICTA bill is yet to even, be approved, in the pre-publication scrutiny for it to be a formal bill, that warrants now the entire legislative process until its enactment. So where we do come in now as citizens, I think the most important stage is always out of the first reading, just before the second reading, where now either, depending on which particular house is the originating house, it could either be Senate or the National Assembly. And you also have to note that we have bills that have to undergo what you call the duality concept or the duality doctrine. That will mean it has to be passed by the Senate and passed by the National Assembly. And if the National Assembly is the originating bill, it has to be passed by the Senate, then taken back to the National Assembly before being forwarded by the Speaker of that originating house. So the public participation after the first reading is the most intense stage. But the norm, the culture, and what we've been subjected to over time, not just by the legislators of the 13th Parliament. This is the 13th Parliament, and even the previous Parliament, the 12th Parliament. I think the views of the members of the public, and this is something that has happened over time. By the time the respective committee of parliament chooses to sit down and try and analyze all this input given by different stakeholders, then most of this, input given by the members of the public are never considered. So what you do now, if Parliament proceeds to pass that bill, after the second reading, the second time division stage, voted to go to the committee of the whole house, the report of the committee of the whole house table before the entire, committee of the entire setup of Parliament. That's the committee now of the whole, and then taken to the third reading. Of course, substantive amendments can still be made at the committee of the whole house. And the third reading, not much, substantive amendments, save for, either the, schedules or just rearrangement of how clauses are, and then taken to the president. So we can challenge, a bill that is not really pro people, after its enactment by, the president. And sometimes you'd find that a bill takes, the commencement date of any bill into law differs depending on, the subject matters. So that those bills that have been challenged, after, enactment, by the president after being asserted into law, because they disregarded the public participation stage of the first reading, and even during the pre-publication, scrutiny. And tomorrow around, 7:30 or so, Mzalendo Trust, will be hosting the civic education, but on bills, technically, the legislative process, the bills, that are of utmost, perhaps, importance to us, like the conflict of interest bill, which was passed by the Senate with, raft of very, for lack of a better word, silly and inconsiderate amendments to allow legislators to do business with government and even their wives and the extended, concubines, if any, to do exactly that which the law prohibits them to do, but because of lack of accountability, because of lack of compliance with Chapter 6 of the Constitution, what legislators are doing, they're disregarding, exactly what is happening. Because when it is time, quote unquote, to eat, all of them gather together. And it doesn't matter whether you're in the opposition or you're in the ruling party, but when it comes to such amendments, best believe they will always lock heads and lock horns and whatever it is to ensure such amendments passes. So Mzalendo Trust tomorrow still on space. I'll be one of the panelists. So just trying to talk about those particular bills and even the legislative process. What should be done at what stage and what have you. So today I won't spend much time on this, but that's basically the framework and the overview of where does our voice matter more when it comes to the legislative process. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, PLO, for those responses. I think someone asked the question about running a flag in their motor vehicle, in their cars and in their vehicles. I think there's a difference between running a flag the same way the president runs it, and there's legislation to it, and there is also precedent in terms of case law. And I don't think it's possible for you to run a flag that way. But generally, carrying the and using it the unity that comes with the flag. Remember, when we celebrate as a country, we raise the national flag. Remember, when we win in the athlete in the sports field, we raise the national flag. It's a symbol of unity, and therefore there is no offense any of the Kenyan citizens actually having the flag in their possession or putting it in your car, but running it the way it's run by the president, because I believe the president and the deputy president have a right under statute to actually have the flags in their cars. But it boils down to the mode, and I think this is a question that most of the advocates here will be able to address. It all boils down to the mode that you choose to run it, but there is no provision of the law that stops you from displaying it. I will call Mosetti to raise the questions here before Ndegwa you come in, so that if there is an extra question, you can be able to pick it up.
Only one thing on that issue of the flag. If you may, I am one of the proponents that believes in the school of thought that we need to demystify what all leadership is about. And we are demystifying these by reminding these elected individuals that they are not our masters, they are our servants. And that is a constitutional provision and Article 75, that the people of Kenya contemplated a servant leadership when they enacted the new constitution and when they wanted to formulate the manner and the means in which they shall be governed. And for the question of flying the flag, I don't believe it's a preserve of the president or his deputy. One, we all understand that Article 27 is alive, that there shall be no discrimination and that we shall have the benefit of equal treatment before the law. And that question of the equality before the law puts us all in one pedestal. The question of saying that the flag belongs to the president can single-handedly and exclusively fly this flag ought and must be demystified, so that he may not think that he's a demigod, so that we declothe him of this arbitrariness and we declothe him of this arrogance, so that once we tell him shuka, he understands what exactly that means. So in my view, flying the flag ought not be an offense, as Dudley indicated, that all laws before the enforcement, before the effective date shall be applied with the necessary modification, alterations, and adaptations so as to bring them into conformity with the new dispensation. The question of the preserving or exclusively saying that X, Y, Z are the only ones who can fly a flag, we must remember that Article 10, which binds all state organs and all persons, speaks about the principle of patriotism. So why should it be that Mr. William Ruto should be seen as if he's more patriotic by flying the flag more than myself? So in my view, all that has been demystified. I am actually in the process of having one done for myself. I will be flying it as a Kenyan and as a patriotic Kenyan so that then I can be charged. And we deal with it from that perspective. But we must bring this country to the question of accountability. Much of the things that you are seeing happening is because of the indiscipline that is in government. Yet Article 10 speaks about good governance. I am so happy that now the people and the masses have begun to rise up against this impunity and that we have begun claiming the rightful place in our God's kingdom. And that the fullness of time, all these draconian laws and draconian habits, because some of them are habits that were borrowed from Mzungu, must be brought to a still. They must be buried. We must forget about them. The president is not above the law. The president and his deputy are servants of the people. That's all I wish to submit on.
Thank you. Thank you. Council, I want to.
Hi. So mine would be a follow-up question to what Wallo had asked before. So assuming military was to take over, what is the exact process? And will they lead till 2027 or there'll be by-elections in between? Yeah, thank you.
I believe that I was called upon
That
earlier.
question.
Sorry?
No, I was just speaking to Manu. I believe that I was called upon earlier to make my submission. So,
Your network is not as good.
I guess so.
I was saying that I believe I was called upon earlier to make my submission. I believe it is all right if I can go right ahead.
Kindly proceed.
All right. There's been talk of the mess, and some gentleman made a long treatise about the history of the mess. I believe that is something we need to dissociate ourselves from, because it is a symbol of colonialism, and I'm not sure that is the kind of heritage you want to move ahead with. I have a question. This is a subject that has also been addressed earlier, but I believe that we need to talk more about it regarding justice for the victims who died during Maandamano. I mean, there's been talk of the officers who shot people, being brought to book. But what is the Law Society of Kenya doing to have these victims at least recognized one and to compensated? I mean, we need. I believe that in some of the mature democracies, when a citizen is harmed by government or by the the representatives of government, in this case the police, they can take the city to court, they can take the police department to court, and then they get they get some compensation, be it monetary, be it recognition, but at least, those families of those people, they need to be, individually compensated for losing their lives, for getting hurt, and all of those. I'd like that to be answered.
Okay. Finished asking the questions you intended to. Can we have Bonnie? Then we have interventions from the advocates on this forum. Bonnie, kindly, if you can take the microphone.
Yep, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I wanted to just I just wanted to speak on one point. We're making a lot of progress, but I think that we're missing an opportunity here. You will agree with me that a large big reason as to why we're having the issues that we have here in our country has to do with corruption. And I'm talking specifically, large-scale corruption. Obviously, the president made his moves last week, sort of accepting that the status quo is not going to continue. We will see what he does at a national level to address the issue of corruption. But I believe that there's a lot of corruption that's happening at the county level, and I don't see enough emphasis on that. I'm not seeing us focus on addressing that, and I feel like we have an opportunity here where we can make big gains in terms of the war against corruption. We can't have a situation where these politicians are running for governorships. They go and steal everything, leave office, and are able to keep the loot and are able to keep their reputation. Just think about this. The governor of Migori stole 2 something billion from that county. If you look at the budget for 2023, that 2 billion is about 30% of the budget that's supposed to cater for over 1 million people. He gets out, he takes that money, settles for 10% of that amount, has his reputation, might run for governor again. We can't have this. And so I'm asking everybody here to not lose focus on all areas where we can make improvements. You saw the issue happened last week with regards to the governor of Kiambu, where he was, essentially there was a press conference by Tatu City accusing him of a shakedown, extortion. I posted something on my X because I'm also a victim of the same extortion. Our institutions are failing us. I have written to the EACC, written to DCI, letting know that I have evidence of corruption by county government officials. I have call records. I have, records of payments. But nobody seems to be interested. Nobody seems to be interested. So we need to put pressure at the county level. We need to focus on the county level because we don't want to lose this opportunity. And I feel like we are spending too much time talking about some things that are, it's good to focus on, but let's try to take advantage of every opportunity that we have to make changes in our country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think someone has asked a question with regard to the military deployment initially and during these sessions on citizen assembly, we have, as the Law Society of Kenya indicated to the members of the public, that we instituted proceedings against the deployment of the military. And of course, some of you are privy to the orders that were issued by Honorable Justice Mugambi. We are serious in ensuring that the substantive questions raised in that petition with regard to Article 241 read together with Article 58 are properly determined by the court to give guidance going forward. I don't think the Gazette notice issued by the former Cabinet Secretary, I hope I'll be proper by indicating that he's a former Cabinet Secretary, pursuant to the directions of the president that he no longer sits in that docket.
Indeed, a former.
We challenge the same. Yes, thank you. We indeed challenge the same, and we are following up closely. As a matter of fact, we are interested in having a 3-judge bench pursuant to the advice of the President of the Law Society of Kenya, Madam Faith Odhiambo, to have a 3-judge bench to determine those substantive questions under Article 241, read together with Article 58 on the questions of deployment of the military and on the question of whether there was an emergency to actually invoke Article 241. We'll be reporting, of course, to the members of the public on the progress of the court case. And I think to answer the question by the person who asked it, I don't think the military will be on our streets for life or for the rest of the period within which this government will be in office, depending on what the court will determine and depending on the prevailing circumstances that lead after this. There is a question that was raised about justice to the victims of Maandamano and whether there is documentation. I want to inform you that indeed we have been documenting every case. And initially when we started this citizen assembly, we indicated that we have been documenting every single case that touches on abduction. And we have been in court on the questions of abduction. We have also been in court on the questions of injuries meted on the members of the public as a result of exercising that fundamental right. We also indicated that we have cases in court on the questions of deaths. And this informs you that we have documentation, and we are continuing and will continue to hold the necessary government entities responsible for giving information and investigating this process, and so that we'll ensure that every person who was injured, abducted, murdered, taken in beyond 24 hours, and any other atrocities under the Constitution are actually someone takes responsibility for that, and so considering that this is an ongoing process, we ask you that you continue finding out the progress of the cases that you have instituted in court, and will not hesitate to report them to the members of the public as to what the court determines. There was a question on corruption and theft of public money. And I think this has been a subject. I think the Law Society has been on the forefront, holding the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Court responsible for the cases they institute and the investigations that ought to be done. You remember the president of the Law Society of Kenya, Faith Odhiambo, did a letter when there were withdrawals, particularly with regard to that Migori matter. The Law Society has an entire committee that looks into those cases, and I think in due time we'll be able to inform the members of the public as to the position the Law Society takes, and as to whether we will challenge any further withdrawal of any properly instituted and approved criminal anti-corruption case against any member of the public, and what the position of the Law Society is. If you have evidence, if you have information against a public officer that touches on corruption, I believe there are several avenues. The Office of the Director of Public Prosecution has an avenue. The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission has an avenue. And I think if you have written to them, please copy the Law Society of Kenya, because we are able to follow up on those letters that have written to those organizations. It's very important that you notify us. And perhaps in confidence, we have shared the Law Society of Kenya toll number. So it's important, if you have evidence against these public officers, just share with the Law Society of Kenya. It will be reviewed by the panel of advocates available, and perhaps a proper position will be communicated through the Office of the President
of the Law Society of Kenya as to which action we'll take. So do not hesitate to actually share such information with the members, the Council of the Law Society of Kenya through the toll number that has been shared in all social media platforms of the Law Society, so that you are able to, if you have documented the evidence and you think with the EACC and they have not followed up, then as the Law Society of Kenya, we shall actually pursue and continue to pursue the individuals in those respective offices to ensure that proper prosecution and cases are instituted against those individuals who have committed those offenses against the public. I don't know whether J. Brian, can you hear me? J. Brian, if you're not there, Wiara, did you ask your question? Wiara, you have the microphone.
We have also Wakili Mr. Mugambi.
Kindly, if we can proceed, Mugambi. Wiara, kindly proceed. You have the microphone.
Mugambi
Okay, hi.
here.
Sorry.
You muted me.
Okay, Mugambi, Wiara, we can have you after Wakili Mugambi.
Thank you very much. You had muted me, so I couldn't activate my microphone. But thank you for the opportunity. And like all the other speakers, I'd like to start by sending my condolences to the families of departed patriots. It was unnecessary, unfortunate, and their deaths will not be in vain. In terms of my contribution, I just want to say a few things. One is to thank Faith, the president, and the Law Society for standing in the gap. I think the image of the Law Society had been damaged quite a lot by previous bickering and also by the bickering that goes on in the AGMs, so that is what the members of the public are used to. But now I think that has been redeemed, and so congratulations, and keep doing the good work. Related to that, I would like to request if you could publicize details of where we could help raise funds for the Law Society initiatives relating to this public interest litigation, because like personally I would like to contribute. I have contributed in other forums in relation to the protests and injuries and all of that, but I would also like to support the Law Society initiatives, and I believe there are very many people who would like to do that as well. So if that can be set up, if it doesn't exist, or if it exists, if it can be publicized a little more. Then there was a question on PPPs. I do know a few things about PPPs, but I wouldn't want to make this a seminar on PPPs. But I'd like to just tell the person who asked that question that a PPP is not supposed to be a private affair where, I think it was Nelson, if I'm not wrong. It's not supposed to be a private affair. So if Murkomen and Co have been doing things behind our backs, then that is illegal, because the PPP framework under the law has the same transparency measures, just like any public procurement. And so whereas the framework is very specific and detailed, the accountability and transparency processes are very much similar to the public procurement ones, which of course everybody will be more or less familiar with here. Then the national flag, I know that was a very interesting question. There's National Flag Emblems and Something Act of 1963, which I agree with Wakili Ndegwa needs to be repealed, because carrying the flag is a symbol of patriotism and pride in it, and it shouldn't be an offense to do so. But unfortunately, we have that 1963 law which gave the Minister for Interior or Home Affairs, whichever it is that is normally responsible for those things, to designate the people who can fly the flag. And in our case, I think when we are having this paradigm shift in the country, this is also one of the things that needs to change. In the UK, for instance, where I live, the Prime Minister doesn't have a flag on his car. Ministers don't have flags on their cars. Only the king has a flag on his car, and it is not even the Union Jack. It is the what is the standard, the monarch's standard. So that's what they have on their car. So we've used the flag as a symbol of power and to get our way on the roads and things like that. And I think that needs to stop. Then on the current protests led by Gen Zs, I am very, very proud of Gen Zs, because they've done what we didn't have the courage to do. And I say that with a little bit of shame, even though I personally have participated in protests in the past, in the clamor for multipartyism that I was at the university, and I used to go for protests. So I did my part, but I think the courage they demonstrated is much more to be admired than what I can say I did myself, or so others do. But I think we need to, as a law society, also probably guide on some of the laws, because the propaganda that is being thrown around, there will be a constitutional crisis, and all of that really needs to be debunked. Because I think, if I hear correctly, the chant Ruto must go is not about the man Ruto only, it is the government. So people saying that Gachagua will become president, I think I'm missing the point. And I think the Law Society should probably publish guidance on some of these things. I am a commercial lawyer, not a litigation or constitutional lawyer, so I may not know some of the details into the level that I can advise anybody without appearing like a fool myself. But I think it is important that we do something along the lines that guide people on what the law is. I think the fear being thrown around that the military will take over and all of that, those are the things that we need to counter by stating the correct position. And as I understand it, the clamor, first of all, by Gen Z is for the IBC to be reconstituted. And the next thing that happens is the resignation of the government and fresh elections. That's what I understand Gen Zs to be demanding, and I think it is the right thing to do. And I don't think anybody should argue that it is unconstitutional or to create a constitutional crisis, because we the people can exercise the power directly. And if we the people decide we need an election, I don't see that there is anything unconstitutional about that. And when I hear...
we're losing you.
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, kindly, President. Yeah.
Where did you lose me?
No, go on, Mr. Mugambi.
You're back now. Now.
So when I hear that there is proposals to have a government of national unity, that's also unconstitutional. But nobody has come up to tell those who are saying that we need a government of national unity that is not in the Constitution. So you can't say on one hand that having fresh elections is not in the Constitution, but on the other one argue that having a government of national unity is perfectly okay. I think, as I said, I didn't want to dominate the call with my ramblings, so I think I'll stop it there for now. And thank you once again for the opportunity and also for everybody who's listening. And I think it is a great sacrifice that everyone is making, and I salute you all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mugambi.
Thank you, Wakili Mugambi, for those contributions. I think if you go to the Law Society of Kenya page, I think you raised the question as to the contributions towards public interest litigation process that the Law Society is undertaking. Of course, we have a pro bono kitty where we bring in advocates who can be able to represent members of the public. Perhaps that will go a long way. If you can access the Law Society of Kenya page on this forum and in the other forums, you will get details how you can make your contributions and assist advocates who are able to pick up these matters that emanate from violation of fundamental human rights. Wiara, you are next. Kindly, if you can raise your questions, and appreciate the advocates who are on this forum, because this is very important and these are collective duty. Perhaps some of the questions being raised will be best addressed by some of you. I know we have a short period remaining before the session ends. I will ask the president to be on the standby to give final remarks, but we need several questions perhaps with the time remaining so that we are able to address them even as we go forward. Thank you very much. Wiara, if you have the mic.
Hi, sorry, probably I had network issues before, but my question was, if the military was to take over, what would be the exact process? And also, would they take over till 2027, or would we have by-elections before 2027? Thank you.
I think, Wiara, we have just answered that question. The military is not taking over government because as a matter of fact, we still have a government under the strict reading of our laws. We still have a president in office, and we still have the government entities in place. The question about deployment of the military is basically based on Article 241 and read together with Article 58. Article 58 provides for emergency situations and what constitutes a state of emergency. And pursuant to that article, then Article 241 gives, under Article 241(3)(b) and C, provides for instances where you can actually either go to Parliament, seek, and the Cabinet Secretary necessary will go to Parliament and seek for mandate to deploy, and Parliament will allow the military to get into the space. Cases we have filed in court as the Law Society of Kenya touch on the interpretation of those two articles of the Constitution, Article 58 and Article 241. And one of the major questions the court to actually interpret substantively will be whether there was a state of emergency in the first place for the deployment that took place previously. And the second question that will be asked is whether Parliament was properly constituted to actually allow the military to come into the civilian space. And thirdly, whether the Cabinet Secretary will do what he did, issue a gazette notice first, and then seek for the parliamentary permission. Our interpretation of the Constitution as the Law Society of Kenya is that Parliament must be seized of the requests from the Cabinet Secretary and relevant government institutions before it makes a decision. It cannot make a decision after it has already been made through the Cabinet Secretary. And those are fundamental questions of law. And of course, whether there was any emergency in the first place to actually have the military come into the Kenyan space to assist the police officers. And so those are questions that are live in court. And we expect, of course, the court to make a determination on those questions. There is nothing, as Mugambi, Wakili, has said, we do not have a state of emergency. We do not have military in power. We have a president, of course, in office as we speak. The institutions of government have not fallen out. They are still in place. And if it happens that the president steps down or is removed on that wave of Ruto must go, then of course our duty as the Law Society of Kenya will to determine whether there is a process. Remember, our duty is basically following up the process and ensuring that the process is properly followed. And number two, ensuring that fundamental human rights are not violated. And at the same time that government and anybody within the space of public office takes up responsibility in terms of interpreting the constitution properly, and actually the directives they give are in conformity with the constitution. We have Hosea. We can have Hosea, then Jay, then DJ. Before I bring forth the president, kindly if you can keep your questions short. Hosea, can you hear me? Mr. J. Brian? DJ Paul? Kimutai? Steve, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you, Mr. Mano.
I hope you can hear me, Steve.
Yes, I can hear you.
Hosea, are you there? Hosea Sitati? Kindly drop your microphone if you don't intend to ask any question. We have Evans. James.
James.
Okay. Thank you for this opportunity once again, and thanks for the first two questions that has been answered. But there are questions that have not been answered, and I would like to repeat it again. What steps has LSK taken so far regarding auditing of our national debt, since there was a whistleblower who cited money loudly in the name of loan? If that question can be answered, I may also feel satisfied.
Okay. Thanks for that question. I think the Citizen Assembly addressed the question of the auditing of the national debt. And I think if you've been keen enough, you've seen the position of the Law Society with regard to the task force that was created by the President of the Republic of Kenya to actually deal with the question of debt. And I think the position of the LSK was very simple, that Article 229 provides for proper process under the OAG, the Auditor General's Office, to first deal with public debt, not only public debt, but also the expenditures of all the ministries and public offices. And we indicated clearly that these duties given to the Auditor General cannot be taken away by a task force through a presidential executive order. And that is why the Law Society declined to participate in the task force that was created, because it was extra constitutional, and it could not have taken away the functions and duties of the Auditor General. Remember, the Constitution creates that office as an independent office. And so we are here fighting to reduce public expenditure, fighting to reduce, the loss of public funds. But the executive is in creating institutions through task forces, through executive orders, which will actually convolute the public debt and also convolute public expenditure. And that's why it was very important that the government, if it's listening and if it's keen, it should engage the institutions provided under the Constitution. And in this case, the Office of the Auditor General, to actually conduct a forensic audit on the public debt and report to the president. Remember, these are some of the offices created under the Constitution which are deemed to be independent. And so the president can only request them to actually conduct the same and report to him because he is the president of the Republic of Kenya. They have a duty to investigate, they have access, they have resources, they have constitutional and legislative legitimacy to do that work because that is the purpose of an auditor general. And so we went to court to challenge the decision to have a task force. And again, we gave an advisory through the letter that the president of the Law Society of Kenya gave that kindly follow the process under Article 229 of the Constitution of Kenya with regard to the question of audit of public finance, public debt, and you have an entity that is paid by the taxpayer to conduct these audits. And remember, we indicated that the Auditor General publishes all audits from parastatals, government entities, universities, and any government entity that actually spends public money in their website. The members of the public can access these reports and be able to understand and know how their counties spent the money that is allocated to them, how their respective the spend the money, how ministries and the resources that are put on that are actually they are supposed to spend, and whether they actually use the money allocated to them as per the previous budget towards the projects and activities that such monies were actually put forth under the budget to deal with. And so I hope I've answered.
Okay. I think it's good to there.
Thank you very much. No, if Jay, if you can take over the microphone, then we can have two other questions before I bring forth the president of the law side. Jay, are you there? Victor. Peter. Bonnie, you still have a question? I don't know if anyone can hear me.
Can you hear
Joel?
Manwa? I think.
Joel. Thank you. Joel, you have the microphone.
I wanted to ask a question because I've been following up on cancer issues. But currently on their website, the directors, only one, Mr. Charles Juma, is not available on the website. But the rest, the legal and a couple others are still on. I think they are still on duty, but they were recommended for investigations. So I'm not sure why they are still on duty or why they are still serving under KEMSA as of now.
Thank you for that. PLO, are you there?
Hey,
Kindly pick it up. The question on KEMSA.
I think I had lost him towards the end, so kindly, if he could just do a recap of the question.
Okay, my question is because there was an investigation going on post-COVID-19 scandal under KEMSA, and most of the directors were suspended pending investigations. So only one, Charles Juma, is not a director on the website still, as at to date. But the rest, the legal director, the finance director, I think the warehousing director, the corporate affairs director are still on the website, and they are, I believe that they are still in office. So I'm not sure how far that investigation went or if they were reinstated. Thank you.
Okay. From the starting point of being reinstated or lack thereof, I think I only saw one particular appointment that was made from those that were indicted at KEMSA, and the person was given a different responsibility. However, Parliament had actually the standing committee on health, I do remember for Senate, had launched an inquiry into the alleged irregular the procurement of long-lasting insecticide-treated nets at KEMSA, part of the procurement irregularities that were there. This report was tabled on 8th, if I remember correctly, 8th of May 2024. It was approved for tabling at the Senate. So I think the case has not been substantively solved, and even if they were not, substantively reinstated, then of course you expect, as one of the indictees was given a different position to serve elsewhere, will only mean that our commitment to exactly fighting, our intentions as a country and the executive to begin with, not just KEMSA, but the different parastatals, that have, fallen short of grace when it comes to, accountability on corruption. And the president has still gone ahead to deploy them, elsewhere, or to even, appoint them to serve substantively in different, positions. So the KEMSA story isn't a different one, but I think at the end of the day, like I earlier said, what Dr. Martin Luther King said, the fact the arc of justice, may take too long to bend. Ultimately, it will bend, and what we need to see is the action and not the empty rhetorics, on the act of fighting corruption that the president, has been saying all along. And at the end of the day, the people who have been indicted, the COVID, billionaires have never been brought to book to date. So with that, I think our role as LSK will still be to check on the progress made on the fight against corruption, what has been done, what has not been done, and push to have, accountability, that public funds may actually be, safeguarded, that the public may have, or to win the trust, at the, judiciary, and just give them a vote of confidence when it comes to keeping such people in check. But this fight may not be, won alone as LSK. In the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, all these law enforcement agencies have to work, hand in hand together to ensure that at the end of the day, because right now I think the public trust is waning when it comes to the fight against corruption, and that is what we are striving to bring back. So back to you, Manuel.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Kindly allow me to bring the president. This session was supposed to end 8 minutes ago, but this session was on Article 37 of the Constitution. If you intend to participate in a public protest, kindly remain peaceful. And I think if you access the Law Society of Kenya pages, you will see the guidelines on protests. Do not be armed, and do not destroy, other people's vehicles or harm other non-protesters. Remember that the exercise of the right to demonstrate is an individual decision. If someone else or a motorist is using the road that you are protesting, kindly allow them to exercise their right to move around. Do not assault or harm members of the press. Do not restrict the movement of traffic and other road users. Stick to zoned areas of protests.
Mano, are you still speaking?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, now you're back.
Yes, thank you. I'm saying that the members of the public can be able to access the guidelines that the Law Society has given on the questions of demonstrations. Kindly address the same, access the same in the pages that have been provided. At this opportune time, I want to bring in the president of the Law Society of Kenya, who has been the host of this event. And I wish to thank her for giving the members of the public the opportunity to address questions on Article 37. I wish to thank the advocates who have actively participated on the Citizen Assembly from the time we started it and even as we go forward. It's very important to note that the responsibility and duties of the Law Society are actually stipulated under the Constitution, and it's important that you, under statute, and that is the Law Society of Kenya Act, and it's important that we conduct our duties as the Law Society as per those provisions, and that is why we have these sessions to enlighten the members of the public on their rights and their duties and what is wrong and what is right. Madam President, are you there?
Yes, so I want to just say thank you, Manwa and Steve, for co-hosting, and all the other lawyers who came in to just support. I want to say that we will continue the Citizens Assembly and we'll have other topical issues that we can discuss with regards to also us holding accountable the different offices. I've noted some of your questions on how can we change the constitution, talking about reduction of the wage bill, and people also looking critically even on the Appropriations Act that has now come to pass. But I'd also say being an active or a proactive citizen is quite important, even not only at the national government level, but at the county level, because these are the institutions that are supposed to help bring developmental changes. As also being watchful with regards to how the public funds are utilized, not only by the counties and the national government, but also your members of parliament and women representatives that receive money that ought to be channeled to the right places, that we can ensure we change the systems in our country to enable a majority to benefit, that we can assure ourselves that as a nation we're taking care of the future with regards to education and healthcare services, which will encompass a broader majority of the people of Kenya. I'd want to say we thank you for joining the Citizens Assembly. We'll be notifying you if we'll have one on Friday. And if you have one in between, we'll let you know and the topics that we'll be discussing. Stay safe and God bless.
God bless you too. Have a good one.
Thank you, Madam President. Have a good one, everyone.
Thanks, Rice. Good evening.